So while we're laughing our way through the fall of the Republic, and while we're talking about fear, I wanted to talk about the apocalypse. I want to laugh our way through the fall of the entire universe. And I'll show you what I mean about fear in a moment. But first, let's approach it from this way. One of the founding stories of Western civilization is the story of how Socrates, the Greek philosopher, got in trouble with the law and was finally executed with the law. And he got up in court. So usually called the Apologia, written by Plato, tells this story. It's a wonderful, wonderful story, and it's a wonderful piece of literature. If you've never read it, it's sometimes just called the Apology. But Socrates says that a friend of his, named Klavan, I think is how it's pronounced, went to the oracle at Delphi and asked if anyone was wiser than Socrates. And the oracle said, no man is wiser. No one is wiser. And Socrates says he got curious about that because he knew he wasn't wise, that he had no wisdom whatsoever. It's sometimes quoted as, I know nothing. So I wanted to find out how the oracle, which is always right, could say that I was the wisest man alive. So he went and started talking to powerful people in Athens. So he talked to politicians, he talked to artists, he talked to all kinds of different people who were considered to be wise people, thinking someone must be wiser than I am because I am not wise at all. And what he realized is that they were all a bunch of frauds. Not only were they not wise, but they thought they were wise. And he realized he was wiser than them because he knew nothing, while they thought they knew something. And they thought, the Greek courts thought that it was so funny, they put him to death because he had made fun, really, of all these people. He had belittled all the powerful people. He was canceled, really. It really is true. He was canceled because he belittled the cultural powers in the town. Now, 400 years later, Jesus got in trouble for much the same thing, for making the authorities look bad, and he also was executed. But one of the things he talked about was, he said that the world was going to come to an end, and he after his death, he would return to judge the living and the dead. And he told people what that was going to look like. He said the sun will go dark, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, the heavenly bodies will be shaken, people will see the Son of Man, and he is usually identified as the Son of Man. People will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory, and he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. So a very dramatic moment when the world ends and Jesus comes back to judge us all and gather his faithful around him. So they would say to him, well, when's that going to happen, right? Because at one point, the disciples were kind of looking around, waiting, thinking this was going to happen at any minute. And he said, no one knows. He says, about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven knows, not even the Son of God, but only the Father knows when that will come. So many people read those words and interpret them to mean, I know. I know exactly when it's going to be 8 o'clock on, December 3rd. And this is a very telling fact about people in lots of ways. First, it means that no matter what is written in the Gospels, no matter what's right there in red in the Gospels, they will interpret it to mean what they want it to mean. They will tell you what it means. And the other thing it tells you is people hate the fact that they don't know. And that's what makes them fools. What made Socrates wise was that he knew that he didn't know. But people want to pretend they know. They want to think they know. And I will tell you, as you get older and you keep your eyes open, you know less and less. The more you see, the more experience you have, the more you know less and less. So there are all these predictions, and all through time, that from the beginning of Christianity, there have been all these predictions, not only about when the apocalypse would come, when Jesus would return, but also what exactly it was going to look like, which is actually not in the Bible. By the time you got to American evangelicalism, which calls itself that old-time religion, but really has only been around for a very short period of time, maybe a century and a half. It's not an old-fashioned form of religion. It's quite new. They have this detailed agenda what's going to happen. And you've read those, some of you have read those books, Left Behind, which were massive bestsellers. And they have, they have the rapture, and there's going to be the tribulation, and they all have big, capital letters as they discuss them. The rapture, which is where everybody, all the good people are kind of swept up into heaven, comes from a verse in Thessalonians. It says, this is Paul writing, he says, the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a loud command, with the voice of the archangel and with the trumpet call of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever. Now, that seems pretty obvious to me to be colorful, figurative language to describe a spiritual thing. We all use physical metaphors to describe spiritual things for the simple reason we experience the spiritual through our bodies. We have no other way to do it. And so it has a physical, we feel spiritual things physically, and people take it literally. You know, there's a famous memoir by Saint Teresa, who was a 16th century nun. She talks about an experience of ecstasy. There's a famous statue of it. I think we have a picture by Bernini. Even at the time, it was criticized as being very sexual. It's this nun kind of splayed back with this ecstatic look on her face, and an angel with an arrow. And this is what Teresa says. She says she saw an angel piercing her with an arrow even into her entrails. And now a Freudian, because we're all materialists now, a Freudian would say, well, that's obviously a sexual symbol, but it's really the other way around. It really is a spiritual symbol with sexual imagery, right? Because we experience ecstasy in a kind of erotic way, meaning through our bodies, but we're actually experiencing something spiritual. And I think the same is true here. Nobody's going to be snatched up into the air. Heaven isn't up and hell is down. Those are physical descriptions of spiritual things. And some people don't even feel, I mean, this is the thing. People are so certain about this. People, especially who grew up in an evangelical setting, are so certain that this is the truth. They don't realize there are many, many ways that people interpret the predictions in the Bible. For instance, the book of Revelation, which is often seen as the description of the apocalypse, has been interpreted in many different ways, including that he was describing something that had already happened. These are people who are called preterists, I think, that he was describing something that already happened, or he was predicting the fall of Rome, something that has already now happened. And there are some people who think, no, this is the way the apocalypse is, but it's interpretations. And the important thing is we don't know. To know that you don't know is a kind of wisdom. And by the way, I find it sometimes very upsetting because many lovely Christian people don't invest money and don't tell their kids to go to college because they think the world is going to end. So what's the point? And the thing is, they don't know. Jesus said they don't know. Invest your money, go to college, live your life with the feeling that it could be any moment, so you live a good and beautiful life. I do think, though, that there is a Christian view of the end of the world that differs from the materialist view of the end of the world. And those are two different kinds of view. And one of the points about a Christian view is there are going to be, in a sense, two ends of the world. There's going to be an end for people who had faith and who believed, and there's going to be an end for people who did not have faith and did not believe and lived out the meaning of that creed. I mean, I don't think the thing about belief is it's not saying, oh, yes, I believe in Jesus and I'm on the Jesus team. It's a way of living your life, right? I mean, if you believe in gravity, you don't step off a roof. And if you believe in Jesus, you don't pay as much attention to other sins as you pay to your own. And if you've ever seen the Sistine Chapel, and if you haven't, you should, in the Sistine Chapel, there is a picture of the beautiful, beautiful picture of the Last Judgment, where with Jesus with one arm up and one arm down, and one set of people are being sent down into a figuration of hell and are joining the demons in hell, and the others are lifting up into heaven with the saints. And that's the idea of the sort of two different ends. And, you know, it is interesting, and it's interesting but not really that strange, that when we look at the difference between Christian people and how Christian people think the future will be, and materialists and what they think the future will be, we do get a sort of whiff of brimstone. We get to see a sort of the ways this could work out. And I am not pretending, this is all, what I'm saying now is pure speculation, and I'm certainly not saying that the end of the world is nigh, or that this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. I'm saying that when you look at the way materialists picture the future, and you look at the way Christians picture the future, you can sort of see a hellish and heavenly difference between the two. The material view of the future is that everything scientific everything material is progress, and we're going to get more and more progress. I think I've talked about this before. I call this the Enlightenment Narrative. You can read about it in Steven Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now, and Jonah Goldberg's book, which is more conservative, The Suicide of the West. And the idea of these books is that we had this dark Middle Ages, and then we burst forth into a scientific world, the Renaissance. All these words were invented at the time, by the way, as propaganda for the people who believed in the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. The idea was there was a Dark Ages. Like, the people in the Dark Ages didn't walk around saying, like, oh, it's dark, you know? And these were the Middle Ages. They came between the wonderful classical world and the wonderful world of the Renaissance, the rebirth of classicism. The Renaissance means rebirth. And in between, there were the Middle Ages, or the Dark Ages. And the people in the Middle Ages weren't going like, there's some Middle Ages. I wish this was end and we could get to the next phase. We could have the rebirth and the Enlightenment after the Dark Ages. They thought that they were living in the modern world. They thought that they were living at the time when things, at the cutting edge of modernity. So the Enlightenment narrative is pretty simplistic. The idea of the future of just going forward is simplistic, but it does have this going for it. This science has made the world better. I think we all agree with that. Cures have made the world better. And the idea is that that's just going to continue, that science is going to continue, that materialism is going to save us. Now, they don't even call it science anymore. They call it the science, like the Wizard of Oz, come into the presence of the science, follow the science, And so the idea is now, in the Middle Ages, we used to have this sense that we were trying to live a good life in keeping with creation, but now it's we are going to control creation. Everything's material. Material can be controlled. Even our bodies are going to be controlled. Here's a little excerpt from Yuval Harari, the historian. He's a very materialist guy. I think he's wrong about everything, but he's a wonderful writer. And he says, science says that nobody is ever made happy by getting a promotion, winning the lottery, or even finding true love. People are made happy by one thing, and one thing only: pleasant sensations in their bodies, which of course are created by chemicals. So if we put those chemicals into you and you are happy, then you are in fact happy. And it's a real interesting question. Like, if you take a love potion and you fall in love, are you in fact in love? And we'll talk about that another day. But the prophets of this materialist future, guys like Nietzsche, Freud, and Marx, see everything in terms of power, because what is there but the power to control the world? And the interesting thing is we've kind of seen that future we've seen it in the French Revolution, the terror after the French Revolution when everything was going to be perfect. And we're seeing it now in this idea of Mark Zuckerberg and his metaverse. We're just going to be in control of our environment. We're not even going to be human anymore. We're just going to be in control of our environment. Some people, I think, are already living in the metaverse. It's called basically watching porn. But religious people have a different view of the future, which is the view that in going forward, you return to the place from which you came, which is Eden, which is paradise. We're thrown out of paradise. We have to go forward through experience to get back to our innocence. T.S. Eliot, the great Christian poet, wrote a poem called Four Quartets, and he said, we shall not cease from exploration. We're not going back, we're going forward. He says, but the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time. And that, I think, is what Jesus meant when he said, you must become as a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. He didn't mean you should regress to being a snot-nosed, ignorant, helpless little kid. He meant you should go forward until you've become so wise that you see what children see, but you see it with knowledge. So the child thinks the teddy bear can talk. He thinks everything is alive with spirit. He thinks his teddy bear can talk, but you see that the heavens speak the glory of God. And that's a very different future. And you can sort of see how one is going to end up with this kind of hellish, it is hellish. It promises you power. It promises you immortality. It promises you joy. But you see people who live this material life, and they really wind up miserable, and they wind up enslaved. And a few people have power, and everybody else is just living in the metaverse, getting their guaranteed income and sort of sitting in their chair, pretending they're out in the world. And in the Christian idea, we move forward until we return to the garden. We return in love and to a kind of innocence through experience. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, as I said, as the older I get, the more I know nothing. The older I get, the more I see that the world is infused with spirit, which is what I saw when I was a child. When I saw it as a child, just like when people saw it in the Middle Ages, it was almost a superstition. It was almost an instinct propped up by superstition. Now when I see it, it's in fact very clear-eyed and very awake to all the evil in life and to all the material pain in life, but it sees spirit in that world. It sees the world as the voice of God, almost the language of God. I think the difference as we go forward to which way our society goes, not maybe the apocalypse, not maybe the end, although maybe it will be since nobody knows, but I think the difference is going to be what happens to women. And it's going to involve the choices that women make, because I think women are at the center of the problem we're having now, of the fight we're having now, and they are the dividing line between the materialists who want to go in one direction and the spiritualists or the theists who want to go in another direction. I'll talk about that next week. Hey, if you like the content you're getting here, and of course you like the content, it's absolutely spectacular, give us a like and subscribe and you'll get more of it.